Hi, my name is Paul Douglas Abengay, founder of the Blue Earth Project, and you are listening to the Blue Earth Project podcast, where we inspire a higher quality of life by advocating for ecological resilience in southern Minnesota. We promote honest conversations and awareness of local issues through our social platform. We support businesses, individuals, and projects that are making creative efforts to practice consciously. We engage our community, implement our own programs, and conduct independent research in hopes of finding a solution to some of our most paramount problems.
Welcome to the Blue Earth Project podcast. I'm your host, Paul Douglas Ebengay, and I'm joined by our producer, Dave Sandersfeld.
Yo.
And our special guest, Mike Roll, president of the Crystal Waters Project.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. We love what the Crystal Waters Project is doing, and the list of what you're doing is pretty long. Could you tell our audience, your audience, briefly what the Crystal Waters Project is and what kind of work it is that you do?
Yeah, we're a 501c3 nonprofit in the Lake Crystal watershed to better water quality. We are established since 2012, and like you say, have done numerous projects within that watershed.
Great. And before we get too deep into what the Crystal Waters Project is about, maybe you tell us a little more about yourself, Mike.
Yeah, Paul, I was born and raised in Lake Crystal. My folks built a house on the lake, Crystal
cool.
Lake, in 1973. We spent every day as kids enjoying that lake. Swimming, fishing, skiing. Water clarity was exceptional. I have two daughters from a previous marriage that enjoyed Grandma and Grandpa's lake in the early 80s as children. And now in my second marriage, I have an 11-year-old daughter who has never been in Crystal Lake because of the high nutrient content in the lake. So, the passion kind of lit up a little bit, and I kind of consider this my lake. Started Crystal Waters in 2012, and we made some improvements on the lake.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
That's awesome.
Brief pause. There's this other question I want to throw in there, and I'm debating whether I throw it in now or save it for later. Yeah, we'll just go for it. So I know personally that starting an organization with large ambitions and limited resources can be quite the challenge. Being, how many years did you say, 6 years in now?
Yep.
How have you approached the challenges that you've faced, and what were some of those challenges and roadblocks and adversity that was presented to you?
I guess you have to be a unique individual to be able to carry on the so-called torch in something like this. Like I say, it's kind of my lake. I enjoyed it as a kid. And so in my mind, it's just not fair that children nowadays can't enjoy that lake like I did as a child.
Yeah.
And so, that just kind of irked me a little bit, I guess. So I wear my heart on my sleeve kind of guy. And yeah, I've learned in life that you need to surround yourself with good people. You have to search for the people that will, stay with you. The female gender seems to stick with that role pretty good. And so I've got a good core group of gals that seem to enjoy what we do. And in success, obviously, if you see improvement in the lake and you have more people coming into town utilizing the lake, people see that. So then that helps. You get that buy-in, so to speak. And coming up with new ideas all the time. Like I said, I've got a good supporting cast, with some of the different projects that we come up with. And now we're partnered with Minnesota State University, and so they're helping us with some new ideas too. They're kind of involving more people with educational stuff on water quality. So
cool. Yeah, it sounds like a big part of your answer was in relation to the supporting cast. Obviously, you can't do this alone, Mike, and I know personally from my experience starting an organization dedicated to a similar vision it's not necessarily hard to get people to buy in, but it is hard to change the world, and it's going to take a little bit from all of us, and having people who are connected to Lake Crystal are going to be the ones that really stand up for it and fight for it. So it sounds like you're starting to find those people and have found those people over the years, and it's helping take your project to the next level and get a lot done.
Yeah, I mean, you have to research your project. Obviously, I say we started Crystal Waters in 2012, but probably really check that watershed out or research that watershed for 2 years prior to that.
Yeah.
Knowing that in a heavy farming community like that, we have a lot of agricultural runoff. And that was kind of the main supplier of the nutrient load going into our lake, still is. And so, I kind of drove around the watershed and I looked at the farmers and the farming community out there, and I kind of said to myself, well, who would be willing to maybe change, maybe try a cover crop, maybe try a no-till application, something different, something that would maybe lessen that nutrient load going into that lake.
Yeah.
And, the guys that I knew wouldn't change, I didn't even bother talking to them. It just, you're not going to get them to, like you say, change the world in a day, Right. Mm-hmm. But the ones that I thought maybe would listen to the local soil and water conservation people and maybe try some different farming practices, those are the guys I talked to. And, so that's what you have to look at that picture, so you don't spin your wheels and get burnt out.
Right.
You have to find, be smart, work smarter, not harder, is the old cliche.
Yeah.
And
the way we term it is building the new instead of spending our energy destroying the old.
There you go. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different that way. So, that's kind of what, Crystal Waters or I did as far as, establishing, and staying away from the naysayers. There's a lot of bad seed out there that, a lot of powerful people that, can really harm something, as a nonprofit, that has to do against an agricultural scenario. Yeah. And, and just stayed away from those people, knowing that if they caught wind of what we were doing or what we were trying to do, they would come out and say, we'll just use our resources and make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago where I attended a forum and kind of spoke up a little bit, and the next day I walked out to my car from the grocery store and there was a huge dent in the side of it. It looked like somebody took a baseball bat to it. So to whoever did it, if you're out there and you're listening, it didn't faze me, and I'm still going. So, having said that, looking into both of our situations, we are up against some big trends that are working in the opposite direction we're trying to work, and there's a lot of money and resources invested in these big companies. And if we come through, or I come through, let's say, I'm not going to pin this on you, Mike, but if I come through and say, hey, now we want to start using 50% less chemicals in agriculture, well, to a $3 billion company, that means they got to lay off 5,000 employees and change their whole game. So their interest and their legal obligation is to their shareholders to make it the most profitable company they can.
Right.
So when we're talking about the economic side of the detriment to the ecology, it's we're up against a lot, and we don't have the same resources they do, so we got to be really creative, and we got to focus more on the emotional aspect to bring people together and to create change, as opposed to just throwing millions and millions of dollars at it. Obviously, millions and millions of dollars would help out what we're trying to do, very much so, but we've learned to live without it, and I know you guys are a little further along and definitely have some more substantial funding and support and sponsorships, and have been able to do some pretty awesome stuff. But yeah, when you're working from the bottom like you did, Mike, that's very admirable, and thank you very much.
Yeah, no, and I get what you're saying. I think, Paul, what you're seeing though is you're seeing a shift now. When I started even, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was no cover crop in the Lake Crystal watershed, and I'm here to tell you that I don't think I created as much as I've seen this last winter just by me doing what I'm doing. I think the education part of it has come a long ways in the past 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And if you look at a cover crop scenario, that's the hottest thing on the market right now. These guys are figuring out that soil health is the utmost importance, and you just can't keep dumping that nitrogen on there and dumping that nitrogen on there. Eventually, that soil is going to wear out.
Yeah.
And so they're catching on to that, and so I think we're going to see changes coming better, getting more, here in the next, 5 to 10 years. It is. And it's tough. I mean, like you said, if you that's why Crystal Waters, I think, has been successful, is because if we wouldn't have seen any improvement in that lake, I don't think I would have had the success that I've had with it from people just helping do things with it, at that point. It gave them hope.
Yeah. And it quantified the work you were doing.
It did, and where's the money going? That was one of the questions that you'll run into, how are you spending our money when we donate money to your cause? And so, you be very diligent on how you are spending other people's money, and that's kind of what we did, is we made sure with the board members of Crystal Waters that we made smart decisions with the funding that we received in contribution. So
cool. My next question is in regards to the problems that your particular region, Lake Crystal, is facing. It sounds like a lot of it has to do with agriculture, but maybe there's some of it that's not. And I guess a follow-up question would be, is the agricultural, excess chemical situation the worst, the primary problem that Crystal Waters Project is facing and trying to address?
Yeah. So I don't know if you've been reading the paper here in the last couple of days, even the Free Press and the Star Tribune, about the E. coli content in the Minnesota River between St. Peter and Henderson, I believe.
No, I didn't hear about
it. High nitrogen content coming down the Minnesota River. The Lake Crystal watershed is the headwaters for Minneopa Falls. And the Minneopa Falls then drains into the Minnesota River.
Yeah.
The Minnesota River then runs through Mankato, where at the Sibley Park Water Treatment Plant, Mankato draws 60% of its drinking water out of the Minnesota River, treats it for drinking in Mankato. So the theory is that if I don't do better in my watershed upstream, how is Mankato going to keep up treating their water of nitrogen and phosphorus?
Right.
Eventually, they're not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah.
Correct?
Well, actually, it's my understanding that they don't even bother filtering for nitrates. When they're pulling that 60% out of the river, it's in off agricultural season, so the winter when it's not as contaminated. But in the summer, they're doing the 700 feet underground into the Mount Simon aquifer to get all their water, because it would be so expensive for them to filter for those, the extra in the water.
Yep.
So they don't even bother at this point.
Right.
But thanks to you, maybe, because if we weren't helping spread awareness about best management practices, maybe more would be going in there, and we'd find ourselves in a situation where we don't have this aquifer, and now we got to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into filtering it to get it to be potable.
Yeah, I mean, the messy part of the infrastructure part of this thing is that the reason, that they drilled a $1 million well in Minneopa State Park for the bison is because Minneopa Creek is too contaminated for the bison to drink water out of.
Oh, wow.
So there's taxpayer money at its best, being spent on something that, if we go to point source and try and figure out alternatives at point source, then you're not spending that money trying to catch up with everything that you maybe never will catch up with.
Right.
And so, Crystal Lake, the watershed, and Crystal Lake itself is kind of no different than the bottom of the Mississippi River. Everything in the Lake Crystal watershed runs to Crystal Lake. So all of the town, city stormwater sewer systems dump into Ditch 56, which is our main contributor. I think it's, I want to say 800,000 acre farming part agricultural drainage dumps into Ditch 56, which comes into Crystal Lake. Loon Lake, Mills Lake, everything dumps into Crystal Lake. So it's the bottom of the watershed, just like the bottom of the Mississippi River. And so, that's what sounded off, or what, how this thing went so ballistic is because everything was coming to it. And in 2012, it was so bad that, you could smell it from 7-8 miles away. And, so that was when, once again, the passion took over. And when people are talking bad about Lake Crystal, my town or our town, it's time to do something different.
Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate how the name of the lake is Crystal, but things all of a sudden weren't so crystal clear.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so in the 70s, I tell this story to people. We as kids would walk beans, and we would get done walking beans, and we would run to the lake as fast as we could to ski and swim because of a hot summer day. And 5, 6, 7 feet of water, you could see the bottom. And shortly or soon after that, we quit walking beans, and everybody started to use chemicals. And as soon as the chemicals started to roll in, that's when you started seeing changes in all these lakes around southern Minnesota. Up until then, you walked beans. You didn't use any chemicals. So there's the transition period right there. You see it in the early 70s, coming through the I would say the late 70s, and that's where it went. It just took off. And that's, like you say, where the corporate companies saw that, and they went, wow, can we make money off of this deal?
Yeah.
So away it went,
And it sounds like, the impact was immediate, but it took a second for us to realize how deep the impact was. All of a sudden, we found ourselves in this situation where it's like, oh, this is getting out of control. But now we've built this entire industry around, these modern practices that are the antonym to what it is we're trying to create or reverse here.
Yeah, you can use the same example, as DDT. I think it was, I don't quote me on the dates on this, I'm not a historian, but if I'm not mistaken, the early 30s, the early 40s, DDT was the answer for everything. That would kill anything and everything that basically lived.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden we found out DDT was one of the highest cancer-creating agents in the world.
And then we remembered that we're also biological beings, and it may affect us as well.
and so then they outlawed DDT 20 years down the road. Well, here it is, the same thing. I mean, you hear about this new chemical that they come out with, that they have an overspray problem with all of a sudden, and it just basically takes out trees. It takes out, is
this the dicamba?
Yeah, I think it's dicamba, I heard is the name of it.
It's like basically the new form of Roundup that's supposed to be resistant, but it's causing all sorts of issues. I'm not 100% sure of all of that.
I guess I'm not either. But
yeah. So I think it's safe to say that agriculture is the number one, I don't know how I want to term this. It's the focus.
It is, so you have to be diligent. Once again, we, like you say, we're in an agriculture community here. There's a lot of money in agriculture around here. And so, once again, the success of Crystal Waters was, not pointing the fingers at the main contributor. You have to be able to convince people that it's not just them, it's everybody in the watershed, which is true. Mm-hmm. A couple of scenarios that were brought up to me by some of the people that I've met along the way is, hey, everybody's got a piece to this puzzle. Some pieces are bigger than other pieces, but everybody's got a piece in the puzzle.
Yeah.
So the guy that's got 3,000 acres south of Lake Crystal has got a bigger puzzle piece, or a corner piece for that matter, than the little old yard person in the middle of downtown Lake Crystal with the lawn fertilizer.
Yeah.
My father lives on the shoreline of Lake Crystal. He has not restored his shoreline. It's groomed right to the lake. That's the worst thing you can do for a lake shoreline. Mm-hmm. I've been trying to convince him since I started Crystal Waters Project in 2012 to restore his shoreline. Last year was the first year I finally got him to plant some hostas down on the shoreline for restoration of his shoreline.
Yeah.
So, he's part of it too. And so, that's, I think, where the success was, is we just didn't go out into the farming community and stomp our feet up and down and say it's you. We said, okay, can you guys kind of help us with this? And then we went into town and we fired projects up in town. We did the Rake for the Lake. We did the Adopt a Storm Drain program. We pulled 105,000 pounds of carp out of Crystal Lake.
That's a whole lot of carp.
So that's a lot of carp. So then the farming community saw that, hey, the townspeople are starting to take some responsibility too, and understanding that if they're willing to do something, maybe we're willing to do something too, and that's how it steamrolled, and it took off. I mean, that ditch 56 has been buffered, cleaned. We're putting iron sand filters in this spring, this summer. It's just it's a state of the art watershed project for southern Minnesota that everybody's watching right now. So
yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you said what you said about kind of getting the ball rolling, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who care, who want to be stewards of the land, but they're really deep into this sad state, this apathetic state where they don't feel like they as individuals could ever make a substantial change in their own community, at least in relation to the ecology. But when somebody like you comes along, Mike, and gets the ball rolling for them and gives them opportunities to get involved, now it's so much easier. Now they actually believe that they can make a change because they see somebody right in their own community doing just that.
Yeah, I guess I never looked at it that way. There's
should.
a couple of articles out there that have been done on me, and I never considered myself this conservationist green guy. I just took what I thought was not right. And like I said, I try and consider myself a common sense guy. And this lake has been wrecked, or my lake has been wrecked, in my lifetime, in 30 years. And it's a situation where you just it pulls at your heartstrings in my book. Just because of the fact that you see these young kids now not being able to enjoy this thing that I enjoyed all my life, and that's kind of what it went to, and I'm stubborn too. That doesn't help things. So when I take something on, I'm going to make sure that I follow through with it, and so yeah, it's been good for it's mended a lot of bridges in that watershed between farming community and town people, and so yeah, it's been a good thing.
That's great. I'm glad you touched on that dynamic, because there is, to a degree, like a major separation between the urban and the rural communities understanding. Yeah, there's a lot of people in town, maybe who hold positions that allow them to be privy to the information and the situation as a whole, understand what farmers are going through to a degree. But there are a lot of people in the city that kind of look out to the fields, and they're just kind of lost, like a deer in the headlights. They don't know what's going on out there. They don't know what these problems are all about or what the potential solutions could be. I myself, growing up in Mankato, when I went to school, I didn't learn anything about agriculture. I didn't learn anything about our local ecology. So when I found out that it was as bad as it is, and that agriculture was the main culprit, not necessarily the farmers, but agriculture itself was the main culprit, how was I supposed to do anything with my limited understanding? It was, dare I say, almost impossible. Obviously, it's not impossible, because I went and did the years of research before, Blue Earth Project ever even started, to get my own personal grip on what was going on. And just like you, Mike, I think it's something to say that it's not just because we're environmentalists that we're doing what we do. It's because we're from here. It's the ground we grew up on. It's the lakes we used to swim in. We have an emotional interconnectedness and attachment to this land, to this community, the people, the animals, all of it. So it comes naturally,
Yeah, I agree. It is, and and I've told people that now, and you guys are young enough to be able to carry this torch forward too. Is that if you plan on living in the Mankato Blue Earth area, Blue Earth County area the rest of your life,
yeah,
or you and your children and your grandchildren plan on living in this area for the rest of your life, we need to start thinking about water right now.
Yeah,
because they're going to be thinking in trouble, I firmly believe, if we don't change our practices fairly quickly in what we're trying to do here. So, that becomes, I had my eyes opened, I think, as you have, with this scenario, in looking at the overall, scope of it. And, like I say, we're trending in the right direction. The Blue Earth Project is involved with some stuff with the Minnesota River Congress and some things like that. So, I think we're going to see some betterment coming. You hear about some of the watershed districts up down the river from us. getting pretty strict and pretty harsh on some things.
Yeah.
So, I think in the next, 10, 20 years, hopefully wholesale game on with that stuff. So
Yeah, it's going to be one heck of a long battle to ever get back to ground zero or square one, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I said the same thing about Crystal Waters Project. I told people that I would never see any improvement in that lake in my lifetime, and we have improved that lake. So, maybe, just maybe, we can shift it the right way. Yeah, there's been a lot of hurt. I was down the Blue Earth here 2 years ago, and I remember going down to Blue Earth in the early 70s and late 80s, and that water clarity was good. It was real good. And it was pretty tough to go down at the 2 years ago when I went down it, because the erosion is just incredible. And yeah, we talked about that erosion a little bit, and I don't know if I finished that out, but we've, they've identified, I think through a thing called an isotope, where at Lock and Dam number 4 up in Minneapolis, they have identified that the Minnesota River is the number 1 polluter of sediment movement into the Mississippi River. So then you go downstream from from where the Minnesota meets the Mississippi, and they have this sediment rolling into the Lake Pepin area to the point of where they're having to dredge it out, I believe, and channels in it to get these barges through. So, we have a new governor, in office, and I think he's more of an environmentally minded governor too.
Yeah. Seems
so I'm hoping that some of these things come to light, and there's some movement, by the MPCA and some of these other people to help get things moving quicker.
Lucky for us, he's from Mankato.
No doubt. That's kind of an advantage for us, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. Mike, would you agree that southern Minnesota is about to become a hot spot, if not already, for our environmental crisis, but also intervention and activism?
Yeah, I do. I like I said, I think that we've got a good group of people at the Blue Earth County Soil and Water District.
Mm-hmm.
They're a young, aggressive group. They've totally enjoyed the accomplishments in the Lake Crystal watershed with cover crop, no-till, no fall application for nitrogen.
Yeah.
And yeah, we talked about the Minnesota River. Here's going to be a wholesale push on that now, I'm sure, coming from, people downstream. I mean, you and I had talked about a little bit at one of our meetings where, these poor people down in the Mississippi River below us, with all this nitrogen and phosphorus run, it's got to be incredible. And so, yeah, I do. We, like I said, the governor, you've got an environmentally minded governor who is from our area, Mankato. We're the number 1 polluter of the Mississippi River. You can almost tie it together. Obviously, Crystal Waters Project is recognized for what we're doing. So yeah, I do. I think, people are getting, reinvigorated with this, just because they're seeing, like you say, the local resources being so damaged. And, there's a lot of local people in Mankato that are exactly what you said. We're born and raised in this town, this area, grew up in these, on these rivers and these lakes, and I hear it all the time. You guys are doing a great job, Crystal Lake, keep it up. We're trying to get things going in our lake. So, yeah, it's rolling.
And that makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Madison Lake is, they're doing everything that we're doing right now in the early stages. I've got the Lake Washington people, they're asking questions all the time about what we're doing. So yeah, and so you bet, we're living in the right spot right now. So.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I'm glad you feel the same way. One thing that I always tell people when I talk about, us being a hot spot or the epicenter of change or damage, however you want to look at it. Mankato sits right at the confluence of all these rivers. Just inside of Blue Earth County, we've got 7 rivers flowing into Mankato and 1 flowing out. And that just screams leaders willingly or unwillingly. When you look on a map and you zoom out from southern Minnesota, what's the one town that stays on the map? What are the 2 rivers that you can continue to see no matter how far you zoom out? We are right at the point. It's almost like the geography is pointing to us and saying, hey, you've got something sacred here. You got something special, and you better protect it.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I do. We just purchased a place right on a bluff here the last couple of years in Mankato. And, before I would have started Crystal Waters Project, I wouldn't have known anything about this bluff and how valuable it is and how you need to protect it from erosion. So we immediately, plopped in a retaining pond for the water runoff coming through the lawn, to try and prevent that erosion going down that bluff hillside. We immediately took our septic system and planted it in pollinator plant. Like I say, the good things will come to good people, and Paul, you'll get there. You will get there. So,
thanks, Mike. Collaboration seems to, be an important part of the work we do, and there's, I don't want to say a lot of other groups because we're all kind of doing different things and trying to fill our roles and, be the pieces, as big of a piece as we can possibly be to this puzzle, and fitting it all together. Who have you guys collaborated with, and who are your main partners in getting things done? I know you made some mention to partnering with the university here. Maybe you could elaborate on that, please.
Sure. Partnerships are, I learned are what it's all about. That was a valuable lesson for me. So let's talk about that because it is important.
Yeah.
The biggest partnership that I came up with is the city of Lake Crystal. And what we did is we had a shoreline that was city-owned property that was eroding in one of our local parks, Robinson Park.
Uh-huh.
And so one of the local council members donated their council paycheck for the year to Crystal Waters Project on the understanding that money would be invested in a restoration project in Robinson Park.
Okay.
So they asked, the check was for $2,500. So I said, sure, we'll match that money to make sure we get that restoration up and running. So now you take the $2,500 check from the council member person, you take your $2,500 check from Crystal Waters Project, now you got $5,000 in your little bank.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went to the city of Lake Crystal and we said, we've got $5,000 in our bank. Will you match that $5,000 for this restoration project in Robinson Park? They did. So now we got $10,000 in our bank.
This is starting to sound like trading up from a toothpick and you end up with the Maserati kind of story. But keep going. So
it even gets better than that. So now we've got $10,000 in our bank. And so from some of the other fundraising that we've done through Crystal Waters Project, we put in $17,000 worth of lakeshore restoration in Robinson Park in year 1.
Nice.
Year 2, we came up with, we actually wrote for a grant through the DNR through the city of Lake Crystal and received a $60,000 grant for an ADA-compliant walking trail through Robinson Park with new ADA-compliant restrooms.
Nice.
So we have this money being done by the city, and all because of this little restoration project, I firmly believe, is the reason why we got that $60,000 grant. So we make more money, and we decide that we're going to put in an ADA-compliant fishing pier at the end of this ADA-compliant trail through Robinson Park.
Uh-huh.
So we allow $5,000 for this. We go to another local organization in Lake Crystal, and we say, will you give us, it was $2,500. Will you give us another $2,500? So they, Crystal Loon Lake Rec, give us $2,500. So now we got $5,000 in our ADA fishing pier bank. We then go to Hewitt Manufacturing in Nicollet, and we say, can we buy an ADA fishing pier from you? They say, yep, no problem, we'll make you one, 36 feet long, 10 feet wide, got the drop-down side so you can roll your wheelchair right up to the side and cast your fishing pole. It retails out at $17,000. But since you guys are a nonprofit and you're doing the right things, we'll sell it to you for $12,000.
Nice.
So then we go to Nicollet Conservation Club, and we say, we've got 7, 8, 9 grand. Can you give us another 3 to make up for this 12 grand or however the money rolled out? I can't remember exactly. So the Nicola Conservation Club donates their portion of this too. And so, you've partnered with Nicola Conservation Club, Hewitt Rollet Dock, Crystal Loon Lake Recreation, and you have then purchased a $17,000 fishing pier for and donated to the city.
Yeah.
And once again, the fish are biting in Crystal Lake, so hopefully that some people with that have the wheelchair capabilities and accessibility can come and enjoy that. So
yeah. Speaking of fishing, you guys just had an event out there, right? An ice fishing event.
Ice fishing contest. That's our money maker. You have to have fundraisers to raise funding to support your projects. And so I have a very good ice fishing committee that puts the ice fishing contest together. This year we kind of hit the big time. We actually had a raffle for a brand new 4-wheeler that we gave away.
Oh, sweet.
So so that was kind of a new event for us. Local business uptown noticed the improvement in the lakes, sells sports equipment, so they donated that ATV to us for cost. Cool. So once again, there's your effect of seeing some improvement in the lake and people starting to buy in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. So that went well.
Great. Happy for you. If you wanted our audience to take away one thing from today's conversation, or one thing that you could say to move forward with, would you have anything to say on that?
Yeah. Like I said, the water thing, we got to start watching what we're doing with the water. Last 5-6 years have opened my eyes as to, the enormity of the issue. I ran into a gentleman down in Wyndham. His name is Tony Thompson. He lives on I think it was, what did he say? Is it a 180-year-old farm of his?
Oh, wow. Yeah,
it's all the original equipment. He drains all his farmland into Fish Lake, which is the lake that he lives on. It's a 30-foot deep lake in spots, so it is a deeper lake, but it is almost pristine. And he's draining his farm fields into it. So Tony's got the answers figured out. He's kind of way ahead of the ball game. And so he would be a person that I would try and get to, a front line as an example of how you can be very successful and run a farming operation and run it, without so much chemical, and have it so that, you could maybe do things the right way that way. So, yeah, I mean,
what's Tony's last name?
Thompson.
Tony Thompson.
Yeah.
Out of Wyndham.
Yeah, and I'm trying to organize a visit down to his farm with everybody, local conservationists from up here, and some of the local farmers in the Lake Crystal watershed, and then also the Blue Earth County Soil and Water people.
Yeah.
Cool. The other thing that I think would be very important that I've told a lot of people, and that is that you need to have a very, how should I say, a very cordial and a very understanding individual at the Blue Earth County, at the County Soil and Water Conservation Office stage. The County Soil and Water Conservation Districts are the people that deal with the agricultural communities in the watersheds.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that person, that frontline person that goes out and introduces himself to a farmer and wants that farmer to go into a different kind of program for his field, whether it be a no-till or a cover crop, if that person makes that farmer upset in any way, shape, or form, you will not have that farmer do any kind of change or any kind of better management practice to their fields, just because of that one individual. So when Governor Dayton had me speak at his water summit here in Mankato last year, he asked me about how we were having success over in the Lake Crystal watershed. And I told him the exact same thing. I said, you need to have a person at that front line that introduces themselves almost as a salesperson to try and get that farmer to change, to do something different than what he's been doing for the last 30 years.
The ultimate soil and water conservation liaison.
Exactly. And so, this group that I say that we've got here in Blue Earth County, they're doing a great job, and they know and they understand that you can't just come in and point the fingers at someone and expect them to change.
Yeah.
You have to do it very, slow and diligently, to try and get any kind of different operation or performance out of that agricultural producer. So
Cool. Is there anything our audience can do to help you? Is there a website they could go to? Are you guys on Facebook? Do you have any events coming up?
Yeah, we've got our Facebook page, Crystal Waters. I don't do Facebook, Paul. So
It's Crystal Waters Project. Yeah, you got somebody managing that for you, don't you?
I do exactly. and then our website is crystalwatersproject.org. And they just put together a neat photo timeline of some old historical pictures of Crystal Lake and the watershed and some of the stuff that we've been doing. I would invite people to go look at that. It's really a neat deal. And then this summer, the main focus is we're going to have that big dedication of the ADA fishing pier in June during our local Lake Crystal Days celebration. And then iron sand filters. We're trying to incorporate some iron sand filters on Ditch 56. Blue Earth County Soil and Water has some money that they received through a grant allocated for these iron sand filters, where they would allow a cost share. Like Paul, if you wanted to put an iron sand filter in on your field out in Lake Crystal, they cost about $10,000 to put in. This grant money, Blue Earth County would come to you and say, if you're willing to do this, we've got $7,500 here, and then you would just be responsible for the other $2,500.
Very cool.
So no agriculture producer has bid on that yet. They haven't had anybody interested. And so what I said if you have anybody that's on the fence because of, they don't want to spend the $2,500, Crystal Waters Project will invest that $2,500 for them to get that iron sand filter on that pipe.
Awesome.
And so, we're working with a couple of agricultural landowners right now, and we're trying to get a couple of these on. What they do is they filter phosphorus off, and from what I've heard, the reduction rates are 80-90% coming through these iron sand filters. So they'll be good things.
That's substantial.
That's a big one.
This episode probably won't post for about a month or two, so I'm wondering if we should bring up Spirit of Water at all.
Yeah, we should. Big event coming up Labor Day weekend of 2019. Right?
Yeah, September 1st, I think.
September 1st. Is that the date? I can never. I'm not very good with dates. So, What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to let everybody know who might be listening in that in September, Mankato is going to hopefully be having its first Spirit of Water festival. It's you could call it a celebration of water as life, as our most vital resource. And we're going to get spiritual leaders from around southern Minnesota. We're going to invite the native populations, basically an all-inclusive event to get together and celebrate. There's going to be a open face or outdoor market, I guess you could say. I think the name we were coming up with was the Blue Boat Marketplace, and there's going to be a lot of learning experiences, hands-on experiences, performers, be they musicians, storytellers, speakers, coming through to kind of give their 2 cents and to kind of get everybody together and on the same page and kind of rejuvenate this community around our most vital resource, which is water. So I'm excited about it. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me into Minnesota River Congress to help play my part and see it through. And I've got really high hopes for it. It's going to be a free event. There's going to be food served. There's going to be awesome entertainment, and I think it's going to be really good for Mankato. And I hope it has a successful first year and continues to move on and grow. And like I said, it's free. So if you're looking for something to do September 1st, Labor Day weekend, there's no reason you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Paul. I think Scott and the guys, Scott Spartle and the guys from the Minnesota River Congress, they've been doing this thing a long time. Scott started, water quality efforts in the early 70s over in New Ulm on the Minnesota. And so, they've seen the wholesale change too. And, I think Crystal Waters, reinvigorated those guys a little bit.
Good.
Right. And that's what we need. And so, I'm looking forward to it. I think Mankato is going to be open arms to this thing once the word gets out. and so I hopefully can hang on and pull her off.
Awesome. Rooting for you. Rooting for us.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on, Mike, and for all the work you do. You truly have made the world a better place. And on behalf of the Blue Earth Project team, your host, Paul, and producer, Dave, thanks for listening in. Until next time.
Eco exist.
Water is the foundation of life itself, and what we have here is a major water problem. Let's harness the pride that we have for our 10,000 lakes and reclaim what we are quickly losing. Everyone is downstream from somebody.